Hi viewers and welcome to the channel. My name is Shannon Rifkin. In this week's video, we'll be discussing oil and energy stocks in the context of cyclical market rotation in 2021. Now that we've seen some successful vaccine candidates with certainly better than expected effectiveness and maybe a better outlook for global economic recovery in 2021. It's now a question of how best to play this recovery. Oil and energy stocks are a logical avenue for some recovery, at least with oil prices still well below their highs levels before COVID hit. Although there are reasons why I think that despite that, there are some concerns, I think, with targeting these as your best exposure. Just a little bit of a chart here showing the performance of oil since beginning of 2019. Oil is the blue line here, and we've seen that at one point it did fall below zero. At least some crude oil futures did, but we've seen it recover pretty well. It's now actually down only about 30% or a little under 30% over the last 2 years. Meanwhile, we've seen the performance of at least some of these oil stocks, Oil Search, for example, down over 50% from those levels over the last couple of years. Woodside Petroleum really much the most in line with oil, and Santos and Santos and the SX 200, have been the better performers of the two. Why I'm going to suggest that maybe this isn't the best way to play the recovery is that I think that no doubt that as a trading opportunity, oil stocks are a great opportunity. Just simply the demand for oil increasing, and a supply outlook that's largely been dictated in the short term by OPEC, wanting to obviously ensure that oil prices remain as elevated as possible, means that yes, we may see a spike in oil prices, but we're kind of getting to the point now where I'm concerned that by balancing a positive short-term outlook for oil versus, in my view, a very negative long-term outlook for oil, there comes a point at which that, in my view, no longer the best way to play this. One of, I think, the enduring legacies of COVID will be the acceptance of science as fact and the impact that will have on the other big scientific question, of the 21st century, and whether climate change is real, is whether it's accelerating, and what we need to do to make serious change. We've obviously now seen a change in government from a largely climate change denying administration in the Republicans in Donald Trump to Joe Biden, who perhaps with a better position in the Senate would have been able to enact some significant changes to combat climate change in the future, but at the very least is going to be unwinding a lot of the policies implemented by Donald Trump, which will undoubtedly have a very big impact on the outlook for oil and the outlook for renewables going forward. But we are seeing generally a lot of governments out there start to just bring forward their plans to lower carbon emissions. You're going to start to see more and more incentives go to clean energy providers, clean energy solutions, and this will ultimately mean that the alternatives that are cleaner, that have forever been more expensive and not at least commercially viable alternatives, are going to start to become at least as cost effective, and soon enough, in my view, going to be significantly cheaper. Perhaps I should have shown this with the next chart, which shows the price of electricity from new power plants over the last 10 years, which shows that the price of electricity from solar, for example, has declined by 89% in these 10 years. Now, we know that the price of sunshine hasn't changed, so it's got nothing to do with lower prices of its inputs, but rather the technologies have improved so much that solar power has become that much cheaper. Additionally, price of onshore wind electricity just declined by 70% in these 10 years as well. This is going to continue. We're going to see battery prices come down. We're going to see the the lifespan of batteries increase as well. We're seeing this already in the share price of Tesla, which is factoring a lot of this into the future. And meanwhile, we're going to see more and more carbon taxes placed on dirtier sources of energy, such as oil. So back to this one, we can see really just here, which is the biggest individual consumer of oil. This is a few years old, but back in 2016, passenger vehicles were the end destination of 27% of global oil demand, which is pretty crazy. Freight as well, pretty significant. Maritime power generation, which I've talked about as well, and more. And with what I've just talked about, is it not unreasonable to think in 10 or 20 years, and certainly, when many of these governments have, 0 net carbon emission targets, what is this number going to be here? I think it's going to be significantly lower. You're probably going to see by that point as well, technology is advanced enough that these things are going to be reduced. Aviation is going to be running on electricity. It's going to be a very different world. So, the long-term outlook for oil, demand outlook for oil, remains very, very questionable in my view. And is this COVID pandemic the beginning of when investors start to factor this into their investment decisions? We've already seen BlackRock, which is the biggest investor in the world, start to factor in carbon emissions into its investment decision-making process. It's already ruled out thermal coal investments in its entire portfolio, and how long before oil is also excluded from its investments. And it's said it's not a political decision, it's a commercial decision, and in my view, it's only a matter of time till we start to see this factored into the outlook for for many fund managers out there, and that's when you're going to start to see oil prices and oil and share prices for oil stocks start to come off the boil. So my view is that while the short-term demand outlook for some of these commodities is really good, oil, one of them in the immediate short term, we can get exposure to that theme with names like with copper, bauxite, and perhaps iron ore, although that's pretty elevated. Anyway, thank you very much for listening in. I hope this was of interest to you. If you did like the video, please click like and subscribe, and I'll be back next week.